Hello and welcome to the Vault's Truth YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to be covering the end time sequence. And this is my most current projection as to what I believe is going to take place here in these last days. So as you can see here, there are several biblical countdowns that are tying in kind of in the time frame from 2027 to 2032. They're tying in kind of in the middle of the overall time frame of 2024 to 2034, which is when I believe the 10-year tribulation period is. And this encompasses 3.5 years of seals, 3.5 years of trumpets, and 3 years of bowls. So the first of these 5 countdowns is your 6,000-year earth age. You can just go back in the lineage of generations throughout the Bible, and you see that Adam to Abraham was a period of 2,000 years. Abraham to Jesus' death was a period of 2,000 years. And Jesus returns 2,000 years later. And this countdown ends in the year 2030. The next countdown is one that a lot of people are familiar with, and this is the one mentioned in Matthew 24, where Jesus describes the parable of the fig tree. And this, of course, is referring to the fig generation, which started in 1948 when the nation of Israel was reborn. And in the Bible, it mentions a generation lasts roughly 80 years. So this brings that countdown to the year 2028. The next countdown is one that most people are probably not familiar with, and this is found in Ezekiel 4:4 and Ezekiel 4:6, combined with adding the 80 years of the fig generation. So this prophecy is describing the period of time in which the Jews are scattered across the world. They don't have a home nation to go to, and the Protestant Reformation has just begun, and from this sprouts several churches such as the Baptists, the Seventh-day Adventists, and the Methodists, and so on. And this period is kind of described as a period of iniquity, a period of sin for the people of Israel and the people of Judah. So Ezekiel is told to lay on his left side for 390 years to bear the sins of the people of Israel. Then he's told to lay on his right side for 40 years to bear the sins of the people of Judah. These two periods of time bring you right up to the year 1947, right around the time Israel became an independent nation again. And this period of iniquity came to an end. You then add the 80 years of the fig generation, and it brings you to the year 2027. The next countdown is based on Hosea 6:2, which says, "In 2 days he will revive us," he being Christ. And you've got to remember that in 2 Peter 3:8, it says that 1 day is as 1,000 years to the Lord. So basically it's saying after 2,000 years, Christ will revive us. And that brings us to the year 2030, since Christ departed from the world in the year 30 AD. And obviously the term revive here is referring to the rapture, where we will get our immortal bodies. Hosea 6:2 also hints towards the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ, because it says on the third day, a third period of 1,000 years, he will raise us up to be in his presence. And that's when we will accompany Christ in the millennial kingdom as he reigns from Jerusalem. And so now let's look at the final countdown, the final prophecy that ties in with the end times. And this can be found in Daniel 9:16 to 27. This is talking about Daniel's 70 weeks that were prophesied for the people of Israel, starting with a commandment to go forth and rebuild or restore Jerusalem. This commandment to restore Jerusalem came from Suleiman back in 1542, where he gave the commandment to restore the government of Israel and start rebuilding Jerusalem. If you take Daniel's 70 weeks, which equates to 490 years, and you add that to that date of 1542, you get to the year 2032. And as I will explain shortly, Daniel's 70th week, a period of 7 years, encompasses the seals and the trumpets. So there's a little leeway here, and this period could end 2032 or 2031, depending on if you really want to make the fig generation the unmovable tie-in to the end of the seals based on Matthew 24. If that's the case, then the trumpets must end in the year 2031. So for any pastors or fellow Christians or anyone else out there that tries to argue we are not in the final days, just show them this chart, and there is no doubt we are locked in now to this final 10-year period that really can't go any later than the year 2034. And as you'll soon see in my detailed sequence, major trouble should be happening very soon, even within the seals. I also want to point out something very interesting about Daniel's 70 weeks, and that is there is a dual fulfillment, or two different periods of 69 weeks that were prophesied to take place. The final 70th week is special for just the last days or the end times. But as you can see here, God is very orderly, and several times throughout the Bible, God will demonstrate a dual fulfillment of a prophecy. It just shows you that God is very orderly and mathematical with how he does everything. And the Bible often uses, patterns of time or different kind of patterns to demonstrate the unchanging behavior of God. So as you can see here, not only do we have the 69-week period that I just talked about, where Suleiman restored Jerusalem to the beginning of the seals of the end times, but there's a whole nother previous period of 69 weeks further back in history, starting with the exact same marker of Jerusalem being restored, but this time by Artaxerxes, and leading all the way up to the baptism of Christ, the point in time at which Jesus first arrives into the world. Because remember, that's not necessarily at his birth as an infant in the manger, but it would be at the time where the Holy Spirit actually enters Christ's body and he becomes the actual Messiah. So it's just very interesting to me that the first prophecy of 69 weeks leads to the first arrival of Christ, and then the second prophecy of 69 weeks leads to the seals beginning and leading to that final 7-year period that will bring about the second coming of Christ at the Battle of Armageddon. So now let's look at how Daniel, Matthew, and Revelation all tie together, and why the tribulation period is 10 years and not 7 years like most people think. So the key to understanding how to align all of this correctly is understanding there's an abomination that causes desolation, 3.5 years into Daniel's 70th week. And that this abomination of desolation then starts a countdown of 2,300 days for the temple to be reconsecrated so that the end that is decreed can be poured out on the Antichrist. We also know that the trumpets last 3.5 years, because this is the point in time that the Antichrist is ruling the world. This is also the point in time that the 2 witnesses and the 144,000 witness and prophesy and preach to the world. And so that's a period of 3.5 years. So therefore, since we know the trumpets last 3.5 years, and that's part of Daniel's 70th week, then that leaves 3.5 years for the seals. And then, of course, all of that leaves 3 years for the bowl plagues to be finished. And when those are finished, you then have the Battle of Armageddon and the return of Christ and all of the redeemed in heaven as we come back down to earth to set up the 1,000-year millennial rule of Christ. So what most people will call the tribulation really should be called God's wrath, because the trumpets and bowls are God's wrath. So people are correct when they say there is a pre-wrath rapture, but there is not a pre-tribulation rapture, because the tribulation encompasses all 10 years of this, which includes 3.5 years of Satan's wrath that happens in the beginning. And we will not be raptured out away from Satan's wrath. That is the period of trial and testing against Christians on this earth. And this is also what causes the great falling away, because Christians come under hardship that we're not expecting it. So now let's look at how Revelation 6 and Matthew 24 tie together perfectly. As you can see in the Revelation 6 sequence, you've got the first seal, the white horse, which is the jab activation. I'll explain more of that later. Then you have seal 2, the red horse, which is World War III. Seal 3, economic collapse. Seal 4, disease, pestilence, famine. Seal 5 is Christian persecution and martyrdom. Seal 6 is the fallen angels come down to earth and the rapture. Now, when you look at the Matthew 24 sequence, you see it's the same exact thing. You have wars and rumors of wars, pestilence, earthquakes in various places, love of many grows cold, Christians delivered up to be persecuted and killed. And then, right at the end of all that, it says the gospel reaches the whole world, and then the end comes. And then it mentions the abomination of desolation, which happens at the beginning of the trumpets. So when you line everything up this way, everything in the Bible that refers to the end times and all the scriptures and verses line up perfectly. This is also a direct refutation to anyone that tries to say the rapture comes before the seals, as it is clearly a sixth seal event. We also get another clue to all of this in 2 Thessalonians 1-3, where it plainly says the rapture will not take place until there's a great falling away and the Antichrist is revealed. So now that we have all that squared away, let's move forward into my detailed end time sequence, and this is my best guess right now as to what we are in for here in these last days. So in 3966 BC, this earth age began. Next, the fallen angels came down and fornicated with mankind and created beasts and mutants and dinosaurs, and all of that stuff happened. Then in 2348 BC, Noah's flood came and wiped all of that off the earth. Then around 4 BC, you have the birth of Christ. The church age then began in 29 AD. Then as we move forward through numerous empires, you have the next significant event, which is the 1400s to the late 1800s, where the current nations and the Illuminatis formed. It's also interesting that it was around this time that the globe earth hoax was conceived and developed. And it was really around the late 1800s during the Michelson-Morley experiment where Einstein and the Illuminati elites that backed him and all of the other accompanying scientists tricked the world into adopting relativity to explain why the Michelson-Morley experiment did not detect any of the motions of the Earth that are needed to make the ball Earth model work, but that's another discussion for another video. Obviously, the enemy needs the globe earth hoax in order to orchestrate the alien deception, where the fallen angels will come back down again, disguised as aliens, and hide the rapture by saying that people were just abducted off the earth by aliens, and also so that these fallen angels can be worshipped, because these aliens will be seen as a superior race that come and rescue humanity right when humanity almost destroys itself, which will then lead humanity into adopting not only the one world government offered by these aliens and the Antichrist, but also the final phases of the mark of the beast, which will seal everyone's fate. The next big event we have is the August 2017 Great American Eclipse. It was the first eclipse to form the first part of the X over the United States. That, along with the Revelation 12 sign that occurred in the next month, was God's 7-year warning to mankind that the seals were about to begin. So now let's have a brief discussion about the 5 phases of the mark of the beast. And yes, you heard me correctly. It's not just one event. The Bible lists 5 different events, and they likely occur at 5 different times. First, you have the mark phase. Then you have taking the number of his name, taking his name, worshiping the beast, and then worshiping his image. These are 5 separate events that happen likely at 5 different times. But just realize there's a reason why phase 1 was started, so many years previous to when I have the other phases taking place. It's because a lot of time was needed for the nanotech to do what. And unfortunately, that's all I can say about this, because unfortunately, we live in a world that is being censored like Nazi Germany. Next, we move to March and April of 2024, and this is where the final eclipse over the USA completes the X. And this is God's warning that his 7-year warning period is over and the seals have now begun. Now, from here forward, this is now my future speculation of what I believe is coming in the days and years ahead. So next up on the list that we're going to see is the white horse, or the first seal. And I believe this will be the activation of whatever signal they need to activate to activate the nanotech that's in people's bodies, to cause them to either go mad or to kill off some of the human race. Remember, the Bible says that the 4 horses are going to have to kill 1/4 of mankind. That's over 2 billion people. So even though World War III, and the red horse will be bad enough with nuclear exchange and all of that, they likely need some additional killing mechanisms to bring that number to the full 2 billion. And I believe this white horse and activation of that signal will be one of those things that will probably kill tens, if not hundreds of millions of people worldwide. It will also likely destabilize lots of countries and cause civil wars and all kinds of destabilization events that will lead to persecution of the Christians and hardship for mankind and supply chain issues and all kinds of things. And I believe this is what will lead to the black horse, seal number 3, which is financial collapse. Because by this point, you will have World War III becoming more full-blown. You will have all these other destabilization events, bringing the world economy down, especially the economy of the United States. And then, of course, the fourth horseman, the fourth seal, is just disease, death, and pestilence, and everything caused by the previous three horses. When the economy crashes, the stores will close, the power grids will go down, people will be dying of starvation and living in the elements, and there'll be lots of diseases going around without treatment because hospitals will be closed, and it'll just be pure chaos. I also expect the third temple to be built somewhere around the period of the seals, as it will need to be completed before the abomination of desolation and before the beginning of the trumpets. Now, as the seals progress, you will also have the collapse of the USA, leading to military martial law, lockdown, and FEMA camps, which will likely be when Christians will have to decide between renouncing their faith or facing a guillotine. This will lead to the great falling away as the fifth seal progresses of Christian persecution worldwide. Many Christians will not understand why they are still on the earth and still facing all of this trouble and hardship and facing death. And by the time the great falling away is complete, the unwise virgins will have fallen away, and you will be left with just the wise virgins that kept their lamps burning with the Holy Spirit. And it will only be this small remnant that will be ready and waiting for the rapture that takes place at the sixth seal. And it is at the sixth seal where the fallen angels will come down, disguise themselves as aliens, and work side by side with the Antichrist to bring in the New World Order and one world government and deceive mankind into taking the next phases of the beast. And so it's at the sixth seal that the great exchange takes place between the fallen angels coming down and the remnant of God's people going up. It will also be at the sixth seal where the 144,000 and the two witnesses, whom I believe it'll be Enoch and Elijah, will begin their ministry. And then we proceed into the seventh seal, which marks the beginning of God's wrath. We then move forward to the first trumpet, which I believe encompasses nuclear exchange. And this is where a third of the trees and the grasses burn up, as you would imagine it would be with worldwide nuclear exchange. You can imagine not only the fire from the nukes themselves, but also all of the wildfires and the burning cities and all of that will encompass as a result. Next, we move to the second trumpet, and I believe this will be a combination of underwater nukes planted along the seabed of the coasts of the USA and mega tsunamis produced by collapsing islands off of both coasts of the USA. This includes Kilauea to the west and the Canary Islands to the east. And all they have to do is have nukes planted at the right fault lines in these islands to blow a large chunk of these islands off into the oceans, and it will send mega tsunamis across the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean that will not only hit the USA's coastlines, but will hit coastlines of other parts of the world as well. Geologists have already, produced documentaries talking about how large chunks of either one of these islands could cause mega tsunamis if they were to fall off into the oceans. And so naturally, tsunamis of this magnitude worldwide will wipe out a third of the ships as prophesied in the Bible for the second trumpet. Now, this also marks the judgment of the USA being complete, and this is the final destruction event for the USA, just like the fifth seal was when the judgment of the church was complete. So now we arrive to around late 2027, and Pope Leo, the Antichrist, has just recovered from a deadly head wound. This is going to cause the whole world to worship him, and he will be given power to rule for 42 months or 3.5 years. Then soon thereafter that, the world is going to see the abomination of desolation, where Leo is going to go sit in the throne of the third temple, declare himself to be God. The Jews are going to flee to the wilderness and have to run because they're going to be persecuted. And this is right around the time that World War III is going to come to an end. This will happen because Pope Leo, the Antichrist, and Obama, the false prophet, will draft up the 7-year peace treaty with many. They will also set up the one world government that will have 10 zones and a ruler over each one of those 10 zones. You will then have the one world currency and then the one world religion. And just a couple months after all of that takes place, we reach the end of the generation of the fig, the 80-year generation that has existed since Israel reformed itself as a nation in 1948. And so we hit this mark in May 2028. Then the next thing that will happen, I believe, is the Antichrist will institute the next 3 phases of the beast, which will force people to take his name, take the number of his name, and give him worship. Then we move to the third trumpet, which is wormwood, where a third of the waters are poisoned. And I believe this will be the result of all of the underwater nukes that went off, and also probably part of the nuclear exchange that happened. And that will contaminate a third of the waters of the earth with radioactivity. Then at some point after that, I believe that the final and 5th phase of the beast will be mandated, and that will be worship of the image of the beast. And this could be done through holograms or TV programs or statues or any other mechanical devices, where people will be forced to worship the image of the Antichrist or the false prophet. Then we move to the 4th trumpet, and I believe this will be caused by the added weight on the continents and land masses from all of the mega tsunamis that pile water up on top of these land masses. This will cause mega volcanoes and mass eruptions to happen, causing ash and everything to spew into the sky, which will darken the skies, give the earth kind of a hellish appearance. And then, of course, all of these events that are cracking open the earth are going to cause the 5th trumpet to happen, which is when the demonic locusts are going to spew out from the abyss and come out and torment mankind for 5 months. And then, of course, we see at the 6th trumpet that the peace that the Antichrist strove to achieve will not last long, because he and his 200 million man army will be ravaging the earth, and they will kill off a third of mankind. And it will be around this period of time also that the 2 witnesses and the 144,000 are killed off. Of course, that will only happen because God allows that to happen, because their 42 months is complete. Then next, you will have the rapture of the 2 witnesses and whoever of the 144,000 is still alive. And when the world sees the 2 witnesses get raptured up after immediately having been killed, actually I think the Bible says it's 3.5 days later, it strikes fear into the world, because they then realize that there is a God, and these 2 witnesses were divine messengers of his. And this strikes fear into an unbelieving world. Next, we move to the 7th trumpet, and this is celebration and worship of God's righteous judgments in heaven. And now we enter the bowl judgments, and this is God's final 3 years of wrath. So the first bowl is festering sores break out on everyone that took the mark. Now, if you think about it, with the nanotechnology and the metals that have been put in everybody's bodies from the jab, think about EMF frequencies interacting with those metals and heating them up because they're becoming electrically charged. That would cause the skin to boil up, wouldn't it? Create festering sores and pockets of pus and blisters to break out when these graphene and other metallic particles, all these little nanometals that are in the jabs, start heating up and burning people from the inside, right? It could also come from, unexpected side effects from DNA mutation and things like that. Next, we move to the second bowl. This is where all the seas turn to blood and all the sea life dies. Next up is the third bowl, where all the rivers and lakes turn to blood. So now at this point, all the waters of the earth are now made of blood. You can imagine that it would be very hard for any life to survive now at this point. Now we move to the fourth bowl, and this is where the sun increases heat and scorches mankind. And we already see, the weather's getting warmer and warmer. They try to cover it up by saying it's global warming. Obviously, we know the globe is a hoax, and we know that the changes in weather and erratic weather that we're seeing is coming from God, literally changing the weather of the earth. And in the time of the bowls, God is really going to crank up the heat of the sun to really start scorching people, as if all the other, plagues are not bad enough. Next, we move to the fifth bowl, and this is where people are suffering from agony and pains due to taking the mark. And, this could obviously come from bad genetic mutation side effects. Again, also from nanometals heating up due to being charged. Probably, there's going to be a lot of bad side effects that are going to happen as Satan tries to run some kind of false transcendence hoax where he's going to make people think they are transcending to the next phase of evolution, when in actuality what it's going to do is going to give people some kind of high euphoria probably, and probably artificially make people feel like they have super strength or better clarity of thought. It'll probably be linked into the AI system, the beast system. But when it's all said and done, I would bet the side effects from all this stuff is going to start just eating people alive and destroying their bodies and wreaking havoc. Next, we move to the sixth bowl, and this is where the river Euphrates will be completely dried out to make the way for the Battle of Armageddon. And finally, we go to the seventh bowl, where there will be a massive earthquake, so massive, it'll reshape the topography of the earth, and 100-pound boulders will rain down everywhere. And as you can imagine, devastation on that level will erase anything mankind has ever built. Next, we come to the end of the 2300 days, where the third temple is reconsecrated, and the end that is decreed is poured out on the Antichrist. And of course, this end that is decreed is going to be the Battle of Armageddon. That is going to absolutely destroy the Antichrist and his army. Next, we move to the Battle of Armageddon, and this is where Christ is going to return down to the earth from heaven. All of the Christians that were raptured into heaven will be with him, as well as a whole army of angels that will be around him. And he will come down to the earth, and with one wave of his hand and the brightness of his coming, will obliterate all of the wicked off of the earth, and he will set foot down in Jerusalem, likely down in the courtyard of the third temple. This marks the point in time at which the judgment of the world is now complete. So now God's 3 judgment phase plan is complete, where the church has been judged, then the USA was judged, and now the world has been judged. Then the very first thing that Christ does after that is he takes Obama and Pope Leo and throws them right into the lake of fire. They don't even have a chance to face any kind of possible redemption on Judgment Day. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that right now there are 3 entities that have no possibility of redemption, and that is the Antichrist, the false prophet, and Satan himself. So now at this point, the 6,000-year earth age is over, and we're now entering the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ. And this kingdom will consist of the 2 witnesses, the 144,000, all of those that went in the rapture, anyone who accepted Christ during the pre-Christ period, when Jesus, descended down into hell, into purgatory, to offer all of those who came before him a chance at salvation. Any of those people that accepted his salvation would also be in this kingdom, as well as anyone who accepted God during the period of his wrath, during the period of the trumpets or bowls. And finally, any of the tribulation survivors still in their physical bodies who are deemed worthy and righteous to enter his kingdom, that Christ will basically hand select as one by one as they come through the gates into the millennial kingdom. And that probably won't be very many people, because as the Bible says, God's wrath will be so terrible, if he didn't cut those days short, no flesh would survive. And as you can see in my timeline here, due to the fact that the bowls are only 3 years and the trumpets are 3.5, what would have been 7 years, God cuts back to about 6.5 years. And so this means, unfortunately, those still in their physical bodies that Christ does not see as worthy to enter his kingdom, he will turn away and have them wander out into the wasteland of the earth, which will be in very bad condition because the earth would have just been ravaged by God's wrath. So likely it would look like a hellish wasteland, and it's likely that those that he turns away will probably not survive very long, because all the water will probably still be blood, and there'll be no food to be found, and probably impossible to survive. So not good for those that get turned away. Now, of course, the next thing that happens is Satan and all of his forces are bound up and shackled down in hell, to where they can no longer influence or interfere with the world above and interfere with the millennial kingdom. Then, of course, over time, the group of people that's in the kingdom that still have physical bodies will multiply to a large number again over 1,000 years and many, many generations. And, people in their mortal bodies will still be prone to sin. So they're still going to need ministering to and counseling by all of us who are no longer in our physical bodies, but in our immortal spiritual bodies. And we'll be helping guide these people as they make their journey of accepting salvation and choosing which side they want to go with, the side of Christ or the side of sin and the devil. And that is the point of this final 1,000-year kingdom, is to test the final group of mankind before we enter God's eternal kingdom. And so, this is the reason why, at the end of this 1,000-year kingdom, Jesus is going to unlock Satan and all of his forces one last time so that they can come up to the earth, into this kingdom, and tempt all of those people, still with mortal bodies, to where they are really put to the test, just as all of us were put to the test. So that way it is sorted out, who will go with Christ and who will go with Satan. And then after that determination is made, Christ again defeats Satan and all of his followers and casts them down into hell. This marks the end of the millennial kingdom, and now we enter the period of the Great Judgment Day. Now, during Judgment Day, God basically gets rid of hell. He pulls all of the entities that are cast into hell. He pulls them out and lines them up in the great courtroom of heaven. And each being must go forth, and their entire life and all of their iniquities are put on display for the entire heavenly courtroom and heavenly jury, with God the Father himself sitting on the throne, and Satan as the prosecuting attorney. And a decision will be made one by one, who gets to enter God's eternal kingdom and who is going to the lake of fire. Now, of course, all of the saved beings get to bypass this event of Judgment Day. But just imagine how terrifying this is going to be for all the unsaved. Imagine you've just been tortured and suffering in hell for over 1,000 years. Then you're pulled out of that and are lined up in a line going into heaven's courtroom, where you're going to have to explain yourself to the Creator of everything as to why you committed all the wickedness and evil that you committed. And then having to just lay there in a complete just puddle of your own fear, hoping that God has mercy on you and allows you to pass into his kingdom and doesn't just immediately just throw you into the lake of fire, where it's going to be even more horrific torture, and then you are actually eradicated and cease to exist. So after the process of Judgment Day is complete, then God sets up his new eternal, perfect kingdom, and a new heaven and new earth are made, and the heavenly city, New Jerusalem, is planted down on the earth. And we all have our immortal bodies, our perfect bodies, and the earth is made new and fresh, like a perfect paradise once again. And Christ reigns from the center or the top of this new heavenly city, and Christ himself becomes the source of light. There's no longer any sun or moon. All of the light emanates from Christ himself and illuminates the entire world. And what an incredible, perfect, beautiful life that will be, with no pain and no suffering and nothing but just perfection for all of eternity, which is what God originally intended, but it's taken him 7,000 years because of our decision to eat of the fruit of knowledge instead of just trusting him. So there you have it. That's the end time sequence. So now you've been shown beforehand now that you're going to face some hard times before the rapture. Don't let that cause you to fall away. Keep that lamp burning. Be one of the wise virgins. Stay strong and stay true until that sixth seal rapture. And like this graphic shows, the ultimate goal of the believer, serve Christ, serve the Lord, lay all your treasures above. Stop pursuing things of the world that are just going to pass away. There are going to be great rewards and crowns given in heaven for things that you did for God and things you did to serve the Lord here. And as you see in this background graphic here, this is likely what the city of New Jerusalem will look like from a distance. And I hope to see everyone there. I want to see all of mankind make it to this perfect eternal kingdom. That's just going to be incredible as we live with God for all of eternity, like one big family. And again, if you would like to know how to be saved, you can go watch my video on how to be saved. So thank you for taking the time to watch this, and I will see you next time.